Jaylen Waddle and Nico Collins make it into our top 8 wide receiver rankings with juicy matchups this week. We reveal our full wide receiver fantasy rankings for week 11 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Fantasy Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today is Crossover Thursday on the network, and Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Today, we are finishing up our Week 11 positional rankings with our wide receivers. We've already gone through quarterbacks, tight ends, and running backs over our last 2 episodes, so go listen to those if you missed them. Starting with the guys on bye for wide receivers, Michael Pittman Jr., Alec Pierce, maybe Josh Downs if you were, relying on him, and then Chris Olave for the Saints. But only the Colts and Saints are on bye this week, so not too many players missing at wide receiver. But let's start at the top of our wide receiver rankings. We actually have the exact same 5 wide receivers in the same order, with Jamar Chase being our wide receiver 1, Jackson Smith-Njigba at 2, Puka Nacua at 3, CeeDee Lamb at 4, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown at 5. Those are all obvious plays, and they've been studs this year. Now, my wide receiver 6 is Jaylen Waddle against the Commanders. He's your wide receiver 7. A fantastic matchup for him this week against the Commanders, allowing the 3rd most fantasy points per game to wide receivers this year.
Yeah, look, it's easy with Waddle and Devon Achane because this is the offense. These are the 2 guys. Darren Waller went down. That was out for him, right? He was a thing for a couple weeks, and then he wasn't. Tyreek Hill hasn't ever really been a thing this season. We've been trying to think about other weapons they might use, like a Malik Washington or Ollie Gordon. But these guys are sporadic usage guys behind the big 2 here. Because Waddle and Achane are basically the same player. One plays wide receiver, one plays running back, and they're just the heartbeat of this offense with Mike McDaniel. This is what you can do well, and the Dolphins should be confident they can make some big plays this week in open field. I mean, that's what the Commanders have done and given up the past 2 weeks, playing the Seahawks and then the Lions. There's going to be a lot of open field for some big plays, and Waddle and Achane are both big play guys. So if Achane can go off in a matchup, I think Waddle can too. They did it last week. I think it continues this week. And yeah, he's a very strong play, not just this week, but going forward, because they really don't have anyone else. And it's a big drop off from him to Washington and these other guys.
Now, right after Waddle, I have Emeka Egbuka against the Bills at 7, and then Nico Collins at number 8 against the Titans. Your 6 through 9 go Drake London, Jaylen Waddle, Nico Collins, and then Emeka Egbuka. So we are pretty similar in all those guys. Drake London's my 10, but he's been on fire. You're going to keep playing him. But let's talk about Nico Collins, because it's now official. Davis Mills will be the starting quarterback again for the Texans, with CJ Stroud going to miss another game in concussion protocol. Last week with Davis Mills, it was beautiful for Collins. He had 15 targets in that game, and it turned into 7 receptions, 136 yards. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 5, so he needs to start scoring touchdowns more. But really nice matchup against the Titans, who can be beat up on the outside against those big wide receivers.
Yeah, and again, he's a dominant receiver on his team as well. Dalton Schultz has been banged up, and he's not practicing early in this week, so that would be the next target you look at. But then it's a bunch of guys, right, that are either rookies or just don't have a lot of experience in this Texans offense, period. So Nico Collins, that's sometimes what you get. I don't know if you want to call Davis Mills a lesser quarterback than CJ Stroud. Okay, I guess that's fair to say, but he did lead a comeback, so I don't want to knock him too much. But he's still capable of putting the ball in the hands of the number 1 receiver often. And sometimes that's what the lesser quarterbacks do, right? They just pepper one dude over and over again, and they know where their bread is buttered, right? Nico Collins is going to make Davis Mills look good in this game. Well, CJ Stroud might survey the field and like try to spread it out and try to get cute. I think you're just going to have peppering of targets here, and it's a great matchup. The Titans stink here overall defensively. So again, he's their best offensive weapon. They'll have some success running the ball as well, but it should be a Nico Collins show and a potential smash spot this week. And look, he's back healthy. He's looking good. He's quarterback independent at this point. So that's what we love about Nico Collins.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might be even better, like you said, with Davis Mills back there, just for the fact that he will pepper him with targets and not try to spread the ball around as much. Now, my number 9 is Rashee Rice against the Broncos. I don't feel great about having him this high. You have him at 14. I think that's fair because of how hard the matchup is. The Broncos have allowed the fewest points per game to wide receivers this season, but I mean, it's been 3 games back now for Rice. It's been 19 points, 21 points, 16 points, and that's in half PPR. Like, he is Patrick Mahomes' favorite target, and he has scored at least 1 touchdown in each game he's been back. Last game, it was a rushing touchdown and not receiving, but you still got to go with Rice, even though it's a hard matchup.
Yeah, there's no Pat Surtain, too. I know he's not typically lining up there. He's a lot in the slot for Rashee Rice. He's kind of their big slot. Xavier Worthy, I would not touch in this game, by the way. No. So you can't play him. But Rice is the number 1. A lot of his production that Michelle was talking about with those numbers tied to his scoring, right? He has a good chance to score in this game, and we've seen it often, right? If he's the guy that is the gateway to scoring once, he often is the guy that scores twice for Patrick Mahomes. So that's where Rashee Rice's value comes in a lot with his scoring, his usage in the red zone. He's the better red zone target of the 3 right now between Xavier Worthy, him, and Travis Kelce. So he's the guy that's going to get the key high leverage looks there. We know the Chiefs are going to find their way into the red zone a few times in this game, no matter how tough the Broncos defense is. So I feel okay with Rashee Rice, but I got to drop him because I just don't see a monster game. I mean, 14 to me is low for him, right? If he's not in the top 12, Rashee Rice, that's a bit of a slight, but I think it's just the respect of the matchup I have with the Broncos, and I don't know if I can guarantee you that he's going to find the end zone in this game.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Now, T. Higgins, I have at 13 after Drake London at 10, Justin Jefferson at 11, who we'll get to later, and our worries about him, and Devontae Adams at 12. T. Higgins, just like Jamar Chase, great matchup against the Steelers. Chase will get all the targets, but T. Higgins should have those big plays that he's been having with Joe Flacco. So love him this week. But A.J. Brown is a big story here because he was on a live stream, a gaming live stream, and he said something along the lines, if you got me on fantasy, get rid of me. Just kind of hating on his role in the offense in general with the Eagles. But they have a nice matchup this week against the Lions. And we expect the Lions to be able to score against the Eagles. We expect that the Eagles will have to throw the ball. Like, I know, like, he's down on himself and he's saying, don't play him back. We both have him as a top 15 guy this week. I have him at 14. You have him at 15. I think you can trust him, even though it was a terrible game in week 10 against the Packers. And then Devonta Smith has actually been the more reliable guy in this group. He's done pretty well over the last month. So Devonta, we don't have ranked as high. I have him 19 and 18 just because his ceiling isn't the same as AJ Brown's. But I like both of these guys this week.
Luckily for the viewers and listeners of Lockdown Fantasy Football, I did a deep dive for Sporting News on the Eagles offense and trying to figure out what was wrong. Well, what's wrong is they just don't throw as much as they need to early in games and on downs as well, where they need to be aggressive throwing to A.J. Brown. Like, throw it to him if he's double covered. Jalen Hurts has been very careful with the ball. That's why he only has 1 interception this season. I think Devonta Smith is going to naturally become open, right? With the double teams going to Brown, typically he's the harder guy to cover because he's bigger, stronger, and can also stretch the field. Devonta Smith, again, I think he's always seeing the better coverage, and he can stretch the field because he's using speed and quickness, and that's kind of his role. And you look at his numbers, very similar to last year. And really, with A.J. Brown, they've dropped off big time. A lot of it is the downfield numbers where they're just not getting the same level of after the catch or before the catch stretching the field with A.J. Brown. Now, the Lions can allow those plays, and I think this is all just like a little bit of gamesmanship here. in a weird way, he's reverse trash talking the Lions, where he's saying, "Hey, I'm just an average receiver. Don't worry about me. I'll be terrible in this game." Like, stop it. I mean, you're a key guy on this team. Look, teams are going to take you out and cover you tight. And I think the problem also has been the Eagles' running game is not as scary. So you can put people back and maybe just dare them to run the ball almost and get extra guys in coverage because you don't want to give up the deep ball to Jalen Hurts. He's so good at delivering it. But I think this is a game where A.J. Brown, it's a big game. Detroit is good against the run. They're going to have to open it up and pass it quite a bit. So I am confident that A.J. Brown is going to have a bounce back game to most people's liking this week.
I think so as well. We will get into the conversation about the Vikings wide receivers, Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, and get into the rest of our wide receiver rankings for week 11 right after a quick break.
All right, this episode, Locked On Fantasy Football, is brought to you by Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. More than 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory at Supply House and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts fast for projects? Supply House has next day delivery. Talk about a game changer. The Trademaster perks like priority shipping and dedicated support make the whole process smoother. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line just for you. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use that promo code SHNFL number 5. That's SH, all caps, NFL, all caps, 5 altogether for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. This episode, Locked On Fantasy Football, as Michelle mentioned at the top, is brought to you by Prize Picks, as it's crossover Thursday all across the Locked On network. And you and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of the sports season, whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both. There's no better time right now to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2-player stats. If you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates. That includes California, Texas, and Georgia. Michelle and I will have the Prize Picks of the week, our Moore's selections for week 11 in the NFL. We'll have that on Friday's show. The new stacks feature something you should check out. It's a game changer. You can now pick more on someone's points, threes, and assists in the same lineup. It's a good deal there if you're playing the NBA and the NFL here on Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, all caps, to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's great to be right. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue the show here and look at our next wave of wide receiver rankings, and interesting stuff here going on. Now, one guy we didn't talk about that, should we always talk about this guy? Early in the top 10 is Justin Jefferson. He has been a disappointment, folks. Remember when we were debating, is it him or Jamar Chase? Well, Jamar Chase has made that debate moot here. I mean, Justin Jefferson, look, he's produced with all kinds of quarterbacks, but Kirk Cousins has been his dude. It's not been good with J.J. McCarthy, and of course he had Carson Wentz before then. He misses Sam Darnold, he misses Kirk Cousins. J.J. McCarthy is the problem. So one J.J. is hurting the other J.J. What do you think this matchup brings against the Bears? He typically has good games and a history against the Bears. Will that help him overcome, and maybe McCarthy plays better this week?
Yeah, we both have Justin Jefferson at wide receiver 11 this week, and I think he would even be lower if it wasn't such a good matchup. The Bears have allowed the 4th most points per game to wide receivers, so that's why I even have him top 12, because in his 4 games with J.J. McCarthy, it's 12 points, 9 points, 13 points, 5 points in half PPR, and that was with 12 targets last week. You got 12 targets against the Ravens for 4 receptions, 37 yards. So just not clicking. The game prior to that, 47 yards on 9 targets. He did get the touchdown to save his day slightly, but it's not clicking there with McCarthy. And again, the same thing with Jordan Addison. The only reason he is playable is because he's against the Bears. I have him ranked wide receiver 27. You have him 29. He got 11 targets last week, but again, only 3 receptions, 35 yards. So it's definitely scary with JJ McCarthy, but against this defense, they should be able to at least be all right in your fantasy lineups.
Yeah, there's no way you can sit Justin Jefferson.
No.
As much as you may want to, he's actually still okay with his receiving yards and all that. So he hasn't been a total bust, but he's not the Justin Jefferson dominating. He's not scoring. I know that's been an issue in the past, but he should be scoring more than he is at this rate. So let's hope for the best here. He did have a good game in the comeback mode way back in week 1 against the Bears. So hopefully that'll come through. That version of JJ McCarthy, the fourth quarter version of that JJ McCarthy, will show up in the game against Chicago second time. Now, DK Metcalf. Seems like we're all talking about initials here. AJ, JJ, and now DK. Come on, man. Like, he struggled in that Colts matchup where we really liked him. Then we saw him sadly double teamed by the Chargers. He had that one chance for a touchdown on that 4th down play. Was rejected there at the goal line. So I don't know. I think you have to keep playing DK. That stinks. Like, you just have to keep playing him. We said, when is it going to be time where he gets hurt by other receivers not coming through? We've seen that a lot, but maybe this week the tight ends get involved and that helps DK produce.
Yeah, it's been an atrocious last 2 weeks for Metcalf. He was consistently scoring touchdowns for the majority of the year, and then that's come to a halt. His target, like, he did still get 7 targets last week, so that's good to see it go back up. But they just were not connecting him and Rodgers. He was wide open for a long touchdown that Rodgers just missed on. This should be an easy matchup. Like, I still have him as a playable guy, and so do you. Like, as a wide receiver too, as well. So we both have him ranked as wide receiver 19. Some guys, I have Devontae Adams at 12, T. Higgins at 13, A.J. Brown 14, George Pickens 15, Roma Dunze 16, Ladd McConkey 17, and Devonta Smith at 18. So like those guys still ahead of DK Metcalf, and you're pretty much on brand there with all those guys. So if you have him in this matchup, I don't know how you don't play him, but this is probably the last week we'll give him, right? Because it's been 3 really bad weeks out of the last 4. Yeah, if he can't do it against the Bengals, then he's going to have to go on your bench. Now, Ricky Pearsall, it looks like he's finally going to be back after the longest absence for a minor knee injury I've ever seen, but he's back at practice with Brock Purdy, and both are expected to be back out on the field as long as there's no setbacks in practice this week. They get the Cardinals. I have Ricky Pearsall as my wide receiver 21 this week with Juwan Jennings at wide receiver 23. Well, you have Jennings at 26, but you hadn't ranked Pearsall yet. So how are you feeling about Pearsall? Because I really like him, especially with Purdy back there now too.
Yeah, now I'm actually more interested in playing Pearsall and not really as much with Jennings because George Kittle, don't forget, he kills the Cardinals and Brock Purdy's back, so that should be more for Kittle here potentially. So there are a lot of shifting things already in this 49ers passing game for this particular matchup. And look, I don't think there's room for that many people to produce in this passing game, to be honest with you, because again, Christian McCaffrey is going to get his in the passing game and the running game against the Cardinals. The Cardinals offense might not put up too much of a fight. Actually, the Seahawks running game did really well against them when they kind of had the lead last week. So I think McCaffrey can have a big game. So someone's going to be the odd person out. You think they want to grease Pearsall back from the injury, especially with the new quarterback, right? If it was Mac Jones, you might say, I'm lingering thoughts for Jennings in this one. That's not to say Jennings and Purdy don't have a good rapport, but I think they want to get Pearsall going because he can be a little bit more of a difference maker in this offense than Jennings. Jennings has been very serviceable and usable whenever there's an injury. He's worked the slot, he's worked outside, he's very valuable in that way. But when people are back, typically his numbers are not the same. So again, I think Jennings is playable as a wide receiver 3, but I'd rather have Pearsall as a wide receiver 2. Now, one more thing quickly I'll mention. I know this is a little bit out of order here, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is not playing on the other side. So maybe it's a question, would you play Michael Wilson Jr. or Juwan Jennings this week?
Yeah, we're going to get to Michael Wilson. I actually really like him. I think I might in that scenario, I think Jennings has a better chance of catching a touchdown,
Okay.
but I do really like Michael Wilson as a sleeper pick this week. We both like Stephon Diggs on Thursday Night Football against the Jets. I have him wide receiver 20, of him 24. And then we both like Jameson Williams this week as a wide receiver too. He's caught fire lately. It was a really rough start for him to start the year, but in 3 of the last 4 games, he's scored at least 15 fantasy points, has a touchdown in 3 of those 4 games. So we know at any point he could be lost in the game script or the game plan. But in this matchup, I think he's going to be necessary. And then Zay Flowers, you're a little bit higher on than I am. I don't love him this week. He hasn't scored more than 10 fantasy points since week 2, where it was 11 fantasy points against the Browns, who he'll be playing this week. One big game this entire season. And the Browns at home, we always say this, such a better defense. So I really don't want to play Zay Flowers. So if I had to choose between Jameson Williams, a guy like him, or Flowers, I'm definitely going Jameson Williams.
Yeah, it's so hard with Flowers because he technically is the number 1, but then you see Rashad Bateman score, Mark Andrews pick off the small TD passes, and like, when is he going to get his? And he's kind of just there, right? In the rankings, he's the kind of guy that we don't really talk about, don't get excited about. He's like, okay, I guess I'll play him with wide receiver 2. He'll be okay in certain games, especially when you're counting the receptions and all that, but yeah, he's not exciting. You know what? I should probably bump him down. I mean, I'm more excited about Jameson Williams. It's really, I don't know why I don't have Jameson Williams higher, but it's just that fickle nature, right? Like it's a little bit boom or bust with Jameson, but I think JMO really gets going again. We haven't heard, I'm not sure we've heard totally that Dan Campbell's going to call the plays. Maybe he doesn't have to say anything about it if he's going to stick with it. But what I liked about Dan Campbell, he was using him in a variety of ways. It wasn't just a deep threat. He was using his quickness and treating him like the kind of the third guy with Amon-Ra and Sam Laporta the way he should be, not just, okay, we're going to look up, and then throw a deep ball to him, right? I think you need to get him involved consistently, and that's the adjustment that Campbell made. If that's the case, the Eagles secondary, look, they've been trying to slap together guys back there. I know they've got Cooper DeJean in the slot and Kenny Mitchell out there, but they've tried to find some depth there for sure. So I think Jameson Williams can still burn that Eagles secondary this week.
Let's take a quick break and then we'll get into the rest of our wide receiver rankings. These are going to be more wide receiver 3s, flex type players. And we got to talk about the Jaguars because if Brian Thomas Jr. is back, it could get pretty confusing with that group. We'll discuss that right after we hear from one of our sponsors. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. As the days get shorter and the nights come earlier, it can start to feel a little heavier, especially when life is already packed with work, family, and everything else. This season is so important to reach out and check in with friends, family, or even yourself. Just like checking on a teammate or reconnecting with someone you haven't seen in a while can lift your spirits, reaching out for therapy can make a real difference as well. BetterHelp makes that first step easier by connecting you with a licensed therapist online from wherever you are. And I've noticed that simply just talking through things, even for just a few minutes, helps clear my head and get me back on track. Therapy isn't just for when things are falling apart. It's about staying balanced and growing through the tough seasons. And BetterHelp matches you with a therapist who fits your needs, and you can switch anytime if it's not the right match. This month, don't wait to reach out, whether you're checking in on a friend or reaching out to the therapist yourself. BetterHelp makes it simple to take that first step. Listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon, because taking that step toward support might just leave you wondering, why didn't I do this sooner? All right, let's continue and finish up our wide receiver rankings for week 11. Let's talk about Parker Washington and then Brian Thomas Jr. for the Jaguars. Right now, we are aligned on Parker Washington. We have him as wide receiver 28, right behind guys like Tedero McMillan and Jordan Addison. But then if Brian Thomas Jr. comes back, it gets a little bit cloudier. It's not a good matchup. The Chargers are the second toughest team against fantasy wide receivers behind only the Broncos. And the targets have been there for Parker Washington, but will they continue to be there if Brian Thomas Jr. is back? That gets a little risky.
Yeah, I think I can only play one Jaguars wide receiver. I know they have Jacoby Myers too, but I can't invest in playing multiple Jags receivers, especially the way that Trevor Lawrence is playing in this matchup at home. against the Chargers and the ability to run the ball. And I think that's how the Jaguars need to win this game. They're kind of fading overall as a team. Like Parker Washington, just a little bit of a note, he has a hamstring injury. He's been limited in practice. So now Brian Thomas Jr. is all of a sudden the healthiest potential receiver they have this week. So that could also help his case. Like I think Washington should be able to play, but there's no way that I would want to keep Washington as my number one target if I'm Trevor Lawrence if BTJ is back, right? I don't care what you've struggled with. There's been a misconnection there. I still think BTJ is a top receiver if you can get him going. So again, Jaguars, the passing game does not warrant getting all three guys in your lineup. Like in the past, maybe, right? We've had multiple Jags guys like a Christian Kirk or Evan Ingram when they were doing that, where he's like, oh yeah, we want to get these in the lineup. But now they're a run-heavy team. They're a defensive-minded team. I'm just going to go with one. So if Thomas is healthy, I'd go there. And Parker Washington, again, if you're desperate, if you really miss one of the Colts guys, maybe we're playing Alec Pierce or looking at Chris Olave as wide receiver 3, you could maybe go there, but I would feel a lot better with Thomas as the number one if he's in the lineup.
Now, two guys we actually have behind Parker Washington and Brian Thomas Jr. are Deebo Samuel and Courtland Sutton. I have Samuel at 31, Sutton at 32. You have Sutton at 30, Deebo at 31. Both have bad matchups, and both are not performing. I mean, Deebo Samuel has had now 4 straight bad games. It does not seem to be connecting with Marcus Mariota. He got lucky with a touchdown last week to even get him any points whatsoever. And he's averaging 8.6 yards per reception this season. That's it. Incredibly low. And Miami is allowing the 4th fewest points per game to wide receivers this season. So not a good matchup. Well, Courtland Sutton has fewer than 10 points in 4 of the last 5 games. And the Chiefs are the 3rd toughest team against fantasy wide receivers this season behind the Chargers and Broncos. So not a great matchup for either of these guys, and they're just not getting it done.
Yeah, that connection is a little bit broken, right? Bo Nix and Courtland Sutton were right on point together last year. It's not been the same. Maybe having Troy Franklin, the former Oregon guy, like starting to emerge, and that is becoming a target. They have some chemistry going back to Eugene, so that might be coming into play here slowly as Franklin has become a bigger factor. Marvin Mims actually could be returning this week, so that adds another wrinkle to this receiving core. It's just not a great passing game overall, and I think even with RJ Harvey potentially playing a lot more with the J.K. Dobbins hurting, like I just don't see how this offense does a lot against the Chiefs in general, right? The Chiefs are coming off a bye. Andy Reid is spectacular after a bye. They have the cover guys to shut down Sutton. So we don't like Bo Nix. Part of it is that Sutton doesn't really have an outlet. So typically at home, Nix and Sutton are money in the bank, but not feeling this week. And again, Troy Franklin, I don't know if you can go there this week. If you're desperate, I guess you could. But again, Mims being a factor can hurt Franklin as well.
Yeah, it is. Franklin has been doing his thing, at least 11 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games, at least 8 targets in all of the last 4 games, and 4 touchdowns over that span. So I actually feel a little bit safer about Franklin than Sutton at this point. But yeah, still a tough matchup. Now, we talked about Michael Wilson here for a second, but with Marvin Harrison Jr. out and Zay Jones out against the 49ers, really banged up defense. The 49ers, since Nick Bosa went out, so since week 4, they're allowing the 4th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers in the league. So Michael Wilson's going to get his shot here. He had 7 targets last week. It didn't turn into much, just 4 receptions, 34 yards against the tough Seahawks defense. But in this matchup, I do think Michael Wilson is a viable play. And then there's some other guys, though, that you could be looking at, like Tyler Lockett against the Cowboys. His playing time went up the second week with the Raiders. It went up to 60%. Saw 6 targets, 5 receptions, 44 yards, and that was against the Broncos. This is now the easiest matchup for wide receivers. And Tez Johnson of the Buccaneers, 70% or more playing time in each of the last 4 games. That was up to 84% last week, at least 11 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games and 4 touchdowns over that span. So if you had to choose between these guys, Michael Wilson, Tyler Lockett, Tez Johnson, let's even throw in Wan'Dale Robinson Jr. with Jameis Winston likely starting, where would you go there out of that group?
Yeah, I think I would go Wan'Dale Robinson just because Jameis Winston's going to chuck it crazily around the field. And that's what I feel best about in this group for sure. I mean, I know Darius Slayton came on and had a nice game last week, but that was with Jackson Dart. I think, again, you're not pretty high volume. Yeah, so there we go. And I just think Robinson, if he's whoever the number one target is for Winston, is going to get a bunch of targets in this game against Green Bay. And Green Bay is not the shutdown pass defense, right? They're a very good pass rushing team. They could get to Winston like 5 or 6 times in this game, but you can't throw on them. And the Packers could be in control, where if they're facing some backups here, that you'll see some garbage from Robinson, right? Because they play some zone and leave things open in the middle of the field. So I like Robinson. I think Wilson, if you're desperate. If you're a little bit more desperate, I think I would go Tez Johnson because he has some big plays. Tyler Lockett, again, I just do not want to trust any Raiders except for Genty and what you'll get from Brock Bowers in that game on Monday night. So just a personal preference. They should just get DK Metcalf and Russell Wilson in Las Vegas next year with Lockett and just try their best, and then maybe we'll everyone will be happy and start producing again. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
maybe.
Could happen. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think I really like Michael Wilson the best out of this group. I think all 4 of these guys are playable. Wandell, Tyler Lockett, Tez, and Wilson there, and I like them better than guys like Debo and Sutton and Parker Washington if Ryan Thomas Jr. is back. But that will be it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen of the day. For your second listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler the Madman Rowland gives you a shot of espresso to start your football day, while Tony Wiggins takes you into the barbershop for the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We will be back tomorrow to give our favorite sleepers of the week at each position and then also get into DFS. So don't miss that. We'll talk to you then. Bye, y'all.